What is wrong with you? What's wrong with me? Why? Why are we so in love with a series that constantly does this to us? Why? Anyways, real quick correction on the last chapter video that I did. I talked about Guts swinging his sword down, and Guts, I mean, it should have been pretty evident from how his hands were shaking, but he actually stopped the swing himself instead of it being Griffith's powers. Although, due to, Griffith and the demonstration of his powers in previous shots over the shoulder and stuff like that, that's what I had assumed. But anyways, moving on to this chapter, 368. This chapter felt a lot longer. It had much more dialogue, but the dialogue actually came from all the other characters, not Guts, Griffith, or Casca. I also do want to get this out of the way because it was extremely evident in this chapter, although it was more obvious in the chapter before, and that is the artwork or the art style. This is not Kentaro Miura, and that's okay. No, I don't expect it to be Kentaro Miura. Miura was special, incredibly special. That sort of obsessive attention to detail is once in a lifetime in reality. And so, once again, this is just from my perspective. You can agree or disagree, even though the artwork is clearly different. I personally believe that these chapters have done a great job in portraying the narrative of Berserk and where it's going to be going, keeping us hooked chapter after chapter. And this one was no exception. Chapter starts off with Guts being called Sacrifice and Sacrifice as these black shadows then spin around the group of Isidro, Serpico, and the others. And Isidro seems to try to portray some sort of courage, as then finally the Skull Knight arrives. I actually completely forgot that the chapter was going to be dropping today, and I actually had a video planned being like, look, if I will bet money that if the Skull Knight does not show up this chapter, I will dress up as a maid for the next video. I'll read this one out just because it's the Skull Knight, and almost every piece of dialogue he says is extremely crucial to the secrets in the world of Berserk. But he says, "Tonight a beam of blinding light pierced this land. That flash wedged open fissures which act as passages all over. That is how these things got here. The fact is, this land is sustained thanks to them. You could say they are the true lords of the island. They're too much for ordinary people. Leave." And then the Skull Knight goes into killing them and all that, tells Isidro and the rest to leave, as then we see Roderick and the group nearby the shores telling that they all need to leave Elfheim. We see Roderick's composure and his ability to lead people, as then things seem to be going wrong all across the island. Then more and more of these dark shadows seem to roam through the entire place, attacking everybody, and even consuming a man, ripping him into bits. And then at the very end of the chapter, I think is when we get the most powerful moment, and I think the reason why, again, despite the change in art style and the lack of dialogue we've been getting recently from Guts specifically as a character, I think the little expressions, the facial expressions, really do say the point loud and clear. I think almost louder than any piece of dialogue really could. We see Guts surrounded by these shadows, trembling, a look of utter defeat in his eyes, as then Zod flies away with Griffith, and Griffith holding Casca in his arms. And it's truly a painful sight to see Griffith look back at Guts with Casca in his arms. And the utter look of defeat in Guts' face is absolutely haunting. Just completely haunting. And Casca seems out of it. Her eyes aren't completely shut. They, in fact, seem slightly open. But just think about this. All of the struggle that we had gone through, that Guts had gone through, to get Casca's mind back, to then get her mind back, and instantly have her taken away again. You sick, twisted fans of this series, and I'm included in this. This is torture. But again, I think this chapter does a great job of what I think the last 10 to 15 chapters have done, and that's constantly push us for the next chapter, getting us ready and wanting to read the next one more and more and more. As now, it seems like once we reach the tipping point, there's an even further tipping point. And there was another piece of dialogue from the Skull Knight that I really want to mention real quick, and it's actually the inner thoughts of the Skull Knight, where he says, "This collapse may have been preordained, but could the undying will of man to resist also be a part of fate?" And I think that presents a very interesting question about Guts and if Guts is just another pawn in the grander scheme of the God Hand. Instantly I'm brought to scenes of Slann and Guts, but that could be for reasons outside of narrative ones. And really the possibilities of what could happen next are exciting, as Guts' expression here of utter defeat could turn into one of pure rage. Or will we see a bit of a different reaction from Guts this time? Instead of instantly reacting in anger as he did when he was the Black Swordsman, or in that era, right, of the Black Swordsman arc and Conviction arc, will Guts go through a stage where he legitimately feels defeated? A moment where anger no longer serves as fuel to push him further, but I doubt that would be likely due to the Beast of Darkness within him. And again, with everything that we had recently with the Berserk armor, I think, if anything, now he has nothing to lose. Originally, I had thought that the Skull Knight might show up and intervene, maybe fight Zod, and then we would get more of a confrontation on the island. But it seems that the story is going to be taking us elsewhere as this current arc wraps up. And seeing Guts holding his arm out to the sky as Zod flies away with Griffith and Casca remind me a lot as when Guts reached out in Bubbles of Futility to catch Casca, and he couldn't. He grabbed her, but she slipped away. This time she's completely out of his reach again. Which is why I said that not having dialogue for Guts in this moment, in just having that look of utter despair and defeat, says a million words. And Griffith not saying anything, I think, shows just sort of how far removed he seems to be from Guts. This sense of, you're not even worth words. Like, I'm just gonna look at you and dip. To be fair, they are a far distance apart, so I don't know if there's any point in saying anything. But regardless, it's like Griffith paid basically no attention to Guts this time, simply just going for Casca and leaving. Incredible how little Griffith needs to do or appear in a chapter to ignite flames of just fury for us as readers. And of course, Casca isn't going to say anything. She's completely incapacitated at the moment, but I think that's going to be the next question for the upcoming chapters. What will Casca do? What will she think? How will she react to Griffith and everything in Falconia? There are many different scenarios that play out in my head. The most satisfying one would be Casca having a reaction sort of like Rickert, but a little more aggressive. All the other ones just hurt, and I don't even want to speak them into existence, if you will. And as for Guts, I legitimately am not certain what he does from here, or what he can do from here. How much is he going to have to travel? And it's going to be very, very eye-opening to see his inner thoughts once we finally get them, once he has time to sort of reflect on everything that's happened, which is why I've said in the previous chapter reviews, if you will, that I think that's why we haven't seen much of Guts' dialogue. I mean, when you think about this, Griffith taking Casca, knowing the entire history behind that, what is he to say in that moment? Would this be a moment where we get a more in-depth conversation between the Skull Knight and Guts, where we finally get more of a deep dive into the Skull Knight's backstory than we did before? Or is that something simply for the rest of Berserk and them wrapping it up, they decide to leave more of a mystery and just simply deciding to keep it that way? Does Guts now lean into using the Berserk armor to its fullest extent, or does Guts go through a phase again where he simply just feels defeated? We've already seen Guts go through that hate-filled, vengeance-riddled road, and he saw that that brought him nothing and it only did him harm. And he did everything he could to protect Casca and to get her mind back. Now to just have her taken away in a moment like that, at the end of the day, Guts is human. And even though he's the example of what a human does when they're able to push forward and move forward and struggle, I wonder if we're going to get more of Guts' struggles, but more relating to emotions of sadness instead of anger this time. Since again, this is a much older Guts, and a Guts who has gone through, I mean, do I need to list them off? Reiterate this for like the third time. Despite the artistic differences, this chapter was able to fully I think the word I'm looking for is fully be efficient. Just show the entire destruction of the island and clearly communicating that the characters are going to have to go somewhere else, whilst also showing Guts' pain and his current state without taking too much time doing so. And again, just the emotional roller coaster these last chapters have been for the last 2 years is incredible. I think a lot of Fantasia got slighted, especially during the boat, with how much more relaxed it has been, but I truly think Fantasia has had some incredibly beautiful moments. And if the arc wraps up in the next chapter or so, my goodness, what an amazing arc. Once again, there is so much on the line for Guts personally as a character. And I absolutely love it, and I can't wait to see how this continues to go. Let me know your thoughts on the chapter down in the comment section below, and if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, or if you've just been watching for a while and you haven't already. This has been The Masked Man. Hope everyone has a blessed rest of the day, and peace.